Hello everyone and welcome back to Atman Unlimited. It is Calmotion controller installation day. So let's make the video and show you how this controller gets installed. I'm going to take you step by step and you're going to see it in the video in pretty much real time. So you can see the length of this video is pretty much corresponding to how long it took me to actually install this controller. So let's get going. The first thing that we are going to want to do is record all of the parameters from our old Fadel controller. So you want to record all of your set P parameters. You're going to want to record all your backlash parameters. And then you also want to record your axes surveys if your machine has them. Okay, it's very important that you record all of those parameters because you're going to need to transfer all of that information into the Calmotion controller once you get it installed. The second thing that I recommend you doing, and this makes life a lot easier, is clamp something to the table and then measure the offsets to it very accurately. Okay? So by putting a reference on the table so you have an XYZ coordinate that you know the point of, it will make setting the offsets much easier once you get the Calmotion controller in. So the really nice thing about the Calmotion controller, if you have a DC drive machine, is you no longer have to go in and adjust the position of the motor resolver to set the cold start position. The Calmotion controller has a registry for DC machines and AC machines that will allow you to set the cold start position in the software rather than have to mess with the hardware. So by having a reference point on the table, you'll be able to dial in that cold start position and have it match your older controller exactly, so then you shouldn't have to mess with any other fixture offsets or tool offsets that you may also record. Okay? So after we got that recorded, let's get going on installing the actual controller.
Now that we're ready to actually install the boards into the machine, we're going to start by removing the old Fadel boards. So I'm going to start with the actual processor board. I took the bus connector off the front of the boards and we'll remove the actual CPU board first, then the communication board and the video processing board. Now I'm going to be placing all of my boards in ESD bags for safe storage so that I can reinstall them back in the machine when I return the Calmotion hardware. Now you don't have to worry about keeping track of which board goes in which slot. The installation instructions that come with the Calmotion system are very specific in which slots you have to put the new boards in. They reuse the exact same slots for X, Y, Z, and AB axes, and also spindle axes. So those slots will be the exact same as today. However, recall in our last video where we reviewed the hardware, Calmotion was able to combine the 3 boards that we first removed with 1 board. So you're only going to have 1 processor board now. Now I'm unplugging all of the resolver and motor command signals from my axes cards. Before you do this, verify that the cable markings are there and they are correct. On older machines you can lose the cable markings off of the actual connectors and then you won't know where to plug them back in. So mine are all intact and they are correct, so I was able to easily unplug everything, and then when I put the new boards in, I'll know exactly where to put them back. So now that I have the CPU boards and the 3 axes boards removed, I'm going to start installing the new Calmotion boards. And I'm going to start by installing the main processor board, and I'm carefully making sure that I'm putting it in the correct slot, and again that is per the Calmotion's installation instructions. Now that I have the CPU board in, I'm going to start installing the axis control cards. Now each axis control card is going to have the exact same connector that the original Fadel board had. One connector for your feedback Whether it's a AC or DC machine, it will be a resolver or an encoder. And then you're going to have the velocity command out to the motor drive. So I have a DC machine, so one connector is for the resolver, and the second connector is for the command to the drive. So there is X and Y installed, and now we'll do Z. Again, it is very important to keep track of which command is going to which axes and which feedback goes to which axes. You don't want to cross them up. Now that we have the axis cards done, I'm going to remove the spindle controller, and we're going to replace the spindle control card. The other board I pulled out was my A-axis card. I don't have an A-axis yet. This one's the spindle card. And there is the new spindle card from Calmotion. And again, all of this is in the instructions, and all the cards are clearly marked. Just double checking and making sure I'm putting it in the right spot. And I'm also reading the connectors and making sure that I'm going to connect the connectors to the right ports. If you have a machine that has rigid tapping on it, you're going to have an encoder feedback from the spindle drive, like my machine does. That's what the extra blue connector is. So now we have all the cards installed. Keep in mind from our last video, we're going to reuse the clock card, and we're also going to reuse the mill interface board. So those are the last two cards that remain original. The last step for the main board installation is to connect all of the communication jumper cables between all the cards. This is how data is sent from one card to the other to synchronize the machine for full movement.
Okay, we have all the control boards installed in the main control cabinet at the back of the machine. Now, Calmotion also was nice enough to send us a new monitor, and then we also have to install the video card that goes inside the pendant now. So now let's do that step.
I'm going to start the monitor replacement by, of course, removing the old monitor. So the first connector was the BNC video signal from the old Fadel boards. Then we had the power cable, which is that deep red colored connector. And now there are 4 bolts that hold it down to the little white base plate there. And then the whole entire monitor will just slide right out. It's actually pretty easy to swap these monitors out. Now, just a safety note, if you're actually going to try to perform this, keep in mind that these monitors, being old CRTs, they have a very high voltage transformer, And that's what that red wire is that's going up the right hand side of the monitor up to the top center of it. It's always a good idea to let these monitors sit for a while so that all the caps completely discharge on the board before you go sticking your hands in there. They will give you a good kick if you accidentally hit the wrong part of that monitor if the caps are still charged. So we got the all the nuts and bolts out, and then the monitor is just going to slide right out. Now we're going to put in the nice flat panel that Calmotion supplied us as well. Originally I was going to try to just use an old flat panel and make my own mount for it, but now that I've actually had one of the Calmotion monitors in my hand, if you're looking to replace your Fadel monitor, this is probably the best money you can spend. They make their monitor to exactly fit the Fadel machine. So the physical footprint is the same, the bolt patterns are the same, they put the same exact electrical connectors in, they test them with the Fadel machine so you know it's going to work when you plug it in. All that is done for you. And that has a very high value to it, especially if your machine is down and you're trying to get back into production. So this monitor literally took about 5 minutes to swap out. I was pretty impressed, and I plugged it in and it just worked. There was no messing around. So here I'm just putting in the 4 screws. So the flat panel is so small and so lightweight, they just hold it with 4 socket head cap screws through the front bezel rather than actually bolting it down to the bottom plate like the old Fadel monitor was installed. So we're all tightened down. Now we're going to start connecting the monitor power and then signal lines. So it is that easy. Just connect in the existing connector and you're done. The monitor's wired for power. And then they supply you a ground lead as well. And I just reused one of the old monitor screws and then put the ground lead on where the original ground lead was attached. You guys thought I forgot to put the ground lead on. They gave a spade terminal so that you can just slide it on over the bolt. You don't have to put it on ahead of time. It's not a ring terminal. Now that the monitor installation is complete, we now have to install the Calmotion video card, which has been moved out of the CPU cabinet and into the pendant. What you'll need is the video card needs 5 volts. The machine has a 5-volt supply, and there's a little power distribution board in the upper right hand corner of the pendant that you can get the 5 volts off of. There's a little shot of the connector there where the power is. You can use a voltmeter to easily find it, and it's also listed on the schematics on what pins are there. So once you get your power tapped off, you just take their little video board, you plug in your 5 volt power, you plug in your HDMI cable, and then you plug in your piece of Cat 5 cable, and again, everything is color coded real nice for you. This is not Ethernet cable. So once we have all the wires run to the controller cabinet, we just have to connect them to the processor board. So the yellow one again is the video signal. This little white connector is the feed pot override. You must make sure to move that pot override to the CPU board. And then that last blue connector was the serial port. And then finally, optionally, you can connect an Ethernet cable to your corporate network.
Okay, that's it. We've got the controller fully installed in the machine. You can see how really easy it is. It's a direct plug-in replacement for our old Fadel boards. You really don't have to do anything other than plug and play. Now, it's time to start up the machine. There's some very important things that you need to do and follow to get the machine started and running safely, because this is a brand new controller. We want to power it up methodically in certain steps so that just in case we have a configuration that's incorrect, we can rectify it without damaging anything. The number one issue that we're going to face is the polarity of the servo drives. So throughout the years, your machine may have had the wiring messed with. You don't know. It worked with the old Fadel cards. It may not work with the new Calmotion cards. Now, Calmotion took into account for this. So if you have a servo inversion, meaning, when it wants to go plus, it actually goes minus, so it runs away, there is a jumper on the card that you can swap to easily invert the drive. Okay, but we have to be careful when we first power on, in case one of the axes do run away, we don't crash the machine. So the initial startup when you first install this controller is important. So let's go through it. Number one, we are going to press the E-stop. Okay? By having the E-stop pressed, it's going to inhibit the power to the servo drives. That means that we can go and power up the main switch for the machine safely. We don't have to worry about the servo drives activating quite yet. Okay? So we'll go throw the main switch. Now that we have the machine powered up, we can see that the controller booted successfully. We didn't have any issues. Now we need to go in and re-enter in all of the parameters from our old Fadel controller into the new Calmotion controller. That's the first step that we need to do after we initially turn it on. Now, one thing that I did notice is that the settings in some cases didn't perfectly transfer over. So some of the issues that I had was spindle orientation. That needed to be changed a little bit. The RPM factor, that needed to be tweaked in a little bit. The cold start position needed to be tweaked in a little bit. So, it's a completely different set of electronics. Just by virtue of manufacturing processes, there's a little variation between them. You're going to have to tweak this stuff in. So the old settings are a very, very good starting point. Now, some other things that are really nice is inside the controller is an FTP server. So you can use a computer and use Windows Explorer and FTP to it, and there's an ini file that holds all the configuration data on this controller. You can manually edit that ini file as well to put in configuration. So not only do you have the pendant option, just like the original legacy Fadel, but you have a newer technology method to be able to maintain your configuration, update it, load it, back it up, and store it. So that's another nice benefit. So there's a lot of benefits that we're seeing with this new controller. It's really nice. Okay, once we have all of the parameters entered in again, now we will be ready to reset the e-stop and then go into jog mode for the very first time. Okay? So the whole time you want to have your hand on the e-stop, and if any axes move unexpectedly, push the e-stop right away, so then you can figure out which axes moved, and then you can try the axis reverse jumper on the board. So this is all in the manuals and in the instructions. It all goes through it step by step. After you have the e-stop reset and it's in jog mode, now what we're going to want to do is go axis by axis and just move them a little bit to see if you have control over all three of your axes. Okay? Once you do that, now you can begin the step of, checking your cold start position, resetting your cold start position, and then going through and verifying all your parameters are good, and then you can try some test parts. So again, the installation is very simple. It's not horribly technical. As long as you understand your way around the controller and you're comfortable with the Fadel controller, you'll be pretty comfortable with this controller. You do have to swap cards, so you got to be careful with the electronics. But overall, it doesn't take a large amount of expertise to get this controller installed and up and running. So I'd like to thank Calmotion again for providing us this set of boards and their new machine controller for us to demonstrate it and show it to you guys so that you can make a decision whether or not you want to purchase this controller. Now keep in mind, I did not pay for any of this hardware. This was provided to me by Calmotion for demonstration to you guys and to try it out and do a review. Now I'm not getting paid at all to do any of this work either. So this is all, pro bono on my side. They just provided the hardware so that I would have something to test out and demonstrate to you guys. And so far I've been really happy, and it's really cool what we're seeing with this brand new controller in a legacy machine. So stick around. The next videos that will be coming up on this controller are going to be more detail oriented. So we're going to do a review video of the overall review of what I think of the controller. We're going to machine some parts with the controller, okay? And then I'm also going to show off some of the more advanced functions that they've got. So tool setting, they did a little bit different of the utilities for fixture offsets. And then there's also some really cool features that the Fadel controller, the old one, just couldn't do. You can FTP your files to it. The memory is unbelievably big. You have gigabits of memory, so you can just keep throwing your customers' files on it, recall them all within the controller, and just keep running parts. So a lot of new technology in here, a lot of new features, but it still has the same feel of the old Fadel controller, so you don't have to relearn everything and come up to speed on a new controller. So thanks again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next videos.